Welcome to our video on how to create dashboards. My name is Steve, and in the next few minutes you will learn how to create dashboards in Salesforce that drive behavior in your business and tell really useful stories about your data. In the description I've included links to the reports and dashboards playlist where you can explore every video that we've made about dashboards. I've also included a really helpful video about optimizing Salesforce and increasing results. Check those out when you can. Now let's get into it. All right, let's get into our deep dive about dashboards. So I wanted to start with just a quick example of a dashboard that you might want to take a quick look at, just to give you a feel for the different kinds of things that we're going to show you how to do here in the next few minutes. So this particular dashboard is mostly focused on a custom object called projects, but you could think of projects like opportunities or some other way of managing pipeline that gives you a sense of where your business is coming from. Now you'll look at this particular dashboard and you'll see that there are different charts, or what I will eventually call components. And these charts tell different stories. So this is a pipeline chart or pipeline component, for example. This is a donut component. These are vertical line charts. And in this particular case, I don't have any horizontals, but I'll show you in a minute when we create the dashboard how to select these different components. Now, the big thing to know about a dashboard is a collection of charts. Like you see here, there are 6 charts, and those charts are sitting on top of reports. So in every one of these dashboards, you'll see an underlying report that allows me to drill into it. So if I click the underlying report, if I click that link, it takes me into the underlying report. And this is actually where we're going to start our conversation in terms of the way that we want to build reports. Now you'll notice in this example that this particular report has a project owner, it has a stage, and it has a spec type. Now I'll go through these elements in a little bit more detail in just a minute, but the point I wanted to make here is that my ability to display charts on a dashboard is based on the underlying report and how the underlying report is structured. And in a moment, I'll show you a little bit more about this, but just keep in mind that this video is focusing on dashboarding. We've got other videos in our reports and dashboards playlist that talk about report creation. And so having a good, solid underlying report is very, very important in terms of the quality or the capability of building your dashboard. So in this example, I'm going to use this report that I'm showing you called Projects by Owner and Stage. And I'll use this during the demo to talk you through how to create a dashboard based on that. Now, this is an example of a report that was built on a custom object. You could use an opportunity report to do the same thing. The key thing that I want to mention when I'm in this report, and I'll go ahead and edit the report now, is that the report has one or more groupings. So in this particular report, when I go into edit mode, you can see by looking at the report that it's grouped by owner, then by stage, then by what we call spec type. So in this example, Steve Snapp is the owner. Steve Snapp has a couple deals with blank stage, and he's got 4 deals that are in the conceptual design stage. And within the conceptual design stage, he has 1 that's blank, 1 that's basis of design, and 2 that are competitor specified. So this is an example of 3 levels or 3 layers of grouping. And this level of grouping will have a direct impact on the charts that we can use. Now in a moment, I'm going to go look at the creation of the dashboard. But just to explain the concept of this grouping, I want to just go ahead and select Add Chart, which is the way I would add a chart to a report. This is just, if I'm using this for example purposes. And I want you to be able to see the different charts that are available. And so when I go into Add Chart and I select the different charts to choose from, I have different chart components available because of the grouping that I created. So because I have, for example, more than 2 stages, I have the ability to create what are called stacked horizontal or stacked vertical charts. You wouldn't have these options if you were only grouping, let's say, by owner, for example. So being able to group by multiple options gives your reports more life. Now in a moment, when we get into creating the dashboard, you don't always have to use these groupings in all of your charts. You get to choose how deep you want to go into your charting based on these stages. But one of the rules I like to recommend is if you think you're going to want to access one of those stages or one of those groupings in one of your charts, then add it to the report or make another report where you've got that information grouped by that particular value. So we'll get into that more. And again, like I said, in our reports and dashboards playlist are lots of different videos on how to create reports and how to create dashboards. So there's lots of best practices in there. Okay, so we understand this concept of creating grouping. So let me go ahead and close this report now. And now I'm going to go over to dashboards. And from the dashboard screen, I have the option to create a new dashboard. Now, before I hit this, I just want to mention that what I'm looking at in the dashboard screen is a menu of the different dashboards available. And so in this menu, I have this dashboard that I was just looking at. I have all of the dashboards that I've recently been using. That's the category that I'm on. But I can also look at other dashboards created by other users or all dashboards, for example. And I can look at my dashboard folders. Now, when I create my new dashboard, where I put the dashboard will have an impact on who can see it. And so before I leave this menu, I wanted to give you this context of this being here so you understood in the back of your mind how the dashboards work. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new dashboard. Now, one thing to mention is that if an existing dashboard is close to what you want, you can always copy that dashboard and save it as a new dashboard. For this video, I'm simply going to create a new dashboard. But I want to mention that if you're creating a new dashboard, it's similar to some other dashboard. You can save yourself some time by opening that dashboard, editing it, and saving it if you have permissions to do that. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and call this new dashboard, and I'm just going to call this example projects. And if I wanted to give this a description, I would say this shows example projects. This is a great way when you're looking at a list of dashboards, let's say from that previous menu, this will tell you a little bit more about what it is. So this is just you describing to other people what this dashboard is for. Or you're describing it for yourself in the future if you want to come back to this. And then the folder where you put this dashboard controls who sees it. So in this example, if I were to put this in a public setting or a public folder, then everyone can see it. In this case, I don't want to leave it private. I'm going to just put it in company dashboards, and you can decide who sees it based on who's in that company dashboard folder. So I'll go ahead and select that, and now I'm in that folder. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit create. Now, it's going to ask me for the component or the widget that I want to add to this. So in this example, I'm going to select widget, and I'm going to select chart or table. So in this example, I was just using the report projects by owner and stage, and so I'll go ahead and select that. So I'll select that, and now, a moment ago, I was showing you inside the report how to set the chart. Here, what I'm doing is I'm setting the chart within the dashboard. Now, you'll notice in some cases you can use a chart from the report if the report has one. I don't really like this feature very often because I feel like I've got more control over the chart when I set the chart settings in a dashboard. But if you're using a report that someone else built and they've already put all the effort into the chart, in some cases you can just use that chart in your dashboard and it can save you some time. But if you're building this from scratch, it's my opinion that you don't use this option and just build the chart yourself. Now you'll notice I don't have this as a choice, and that's because I didn't add a chart to that particular report. Now, I've spent some time talking about the grouping in the report. And what I was really mentioning there was now that I know that I'm grouped by owner and stage and spec type, or let's just say owner, stage, and type, I have different options available to me. And you'll notice as I set these options in the report, it gives me different capabilities. So a quick little overview of these components, just so you understand what they're here for and what you're seeing. So in this particular example, the horizontal chart is the first one that you choose. And you'll notice there's a horizontal and a horizontal stacked. Now, the difference between horizontal is horizontal just allows you to select one option. So in this example, I can select from my three groupings. Remember, I did owner, stage, and type. So if I wanted this bar chart to show by stage, I could do that. And I can change that to stage, or I can change it to, there we go. What I'm doing there is it's allowing me to flip. So if I do stage here, then it'll do project owner down there. So it's reversing the grouping, if that makes sense. So again, you can play with that to see how it looks. I don't like the way that looks, so I'm going to go back to owner. And now I can see this, it's hard to see it in the review, but this is Steve, and these are all the deals owned by Steve. Now, you might be saying, I'd like to see the stack. I'd like to see what's owned by Steve and also what stage it's in, and that's where stack comes in. So since I'm in horizontal now, I'm going to go to horizontal stack just so you can see the comparison. So now in this example, if I go to owner and then I stack by stage, this shows me all of Steve's deals. So you can see Steve has up to like 25 million, and then these are the stages of those deals. Now, this is a great technique if you're building two dashboards where you've got a rep dashboard and a manager dashboard, which is something I strongly recommend. And in that concept, where you're showing the sales rep their pipeline by stage, you can show the manager the sales rep's pipeline by stage. And now the manager can see the exact same thing that the rep sees, but he does that or she does that in the manager report. So this is a way of taking advantage of that grouping. Now I'm going to go back to horizontal just to keep it simple, but I wanted to show the relationship between horizontal, stacked, and just straight horizontal. So again, horizontal just means it allows you to show one of your groupings, and stacked allows you to break the bars into essentially a stack based on that. Now the vertical chart is the same concept. It changes the X and Y axis so that the bars are now moving up vertically. And the same thing with stacked, it shows you the same thing. So in the previous example where I was showing you vertical charts, these are stacked charts. And so you can see in this example, this is showing me all my neglected projects or opportunities by stage and that subtype. So there's a filter that was applied to this report that's basically, there's a status called neglected in this example. And so it's showing all of the neglected projects, but what stage they're in, and also what type they are. So again, if these were opportunities, this might be the opportunity stage, and this might be the opportunity type as an example. And so you could see by filtering that, I can see my total number of neglected deals, or the total dollar amount in this example, combined with the subtype of that particular deal. All these things are doing is just helping you visualize areas, in this example, areas of risk or areas of missed opportunity or areas that might require some action. So I wanted you to see that stacked chart concept so you can kind of get a feel for that. Okay, so let me kind of keep going through these different components so you kind of get a feel for it. So a couple of things I like about the horizontal chart is, in this case, if I get rid of stage and I just show project owner, it's a little bit easier to see the name of the category. So let's say I were to change this to stage and it were to show me all the stages. What I like about opportunity, or horizontal rather, is that it gives me a little bit more room to see the actual word of the stage. And I'll show you some other sorting we can do here in a second that are some other nice features. Vertical, on the other hand, is great as a way to kind of see. Notice I can't really see I can't really see the stage as well. I can mouse over and do other things, but I get a chance to see kind of the relationship. And so if I've got a lot of things that are vertical, in some cases I'll use a vertical chart next to like other kinds of charts, just because it kind of condenses all the data into the format that I like. So in this example, I didn't really use any horizontals because I wanted to kind of control the size of my, sort of the height of my item. And so I chose vertical in those examples because I just felt it told a little bit story. But let's say I wanted to show, let's say, stage, like I was saying earlier, and I wanted to be able to see the name of the value, then a lot of times I would use horizontal. In your case, playing with those different displays and playing with some of the other options is really the best way to sort of make a decision on that, but that gives you a sense of that. So like I said, horizontal is great for sort of seeing the values. Verticals, it's easier to see the relationship between the bars, and it's also good for adding a quota via a line chart. Now, in this example, I don't have any quotas that are built into this, but we do have other videos about this, and I can overlay a line chart on top of a vertical bar chart. And you can do it with a horizontal as well, but it just looks weird, I think, when you've got a, if you've got a horizontal chart, you got a line going down like this. But this looks, when you put a line chart on top of this to show a quota, it's just an easy way to kind of see that. And I'll show you some examples of that in just a second. Okay, so that's really horizontal and vertical, and then horizontal stacked and vertical stacked. This next one is a line chart. And a line chart is just a great way to kind of see the relationship where you were seeing the relationship in terms of the size. Now you're sort of seeing the relationship, like, I've got this huge uphill climb to go from this stage to this stage, and I got this big drop. So it's just another way to display it, and it really is a preference in terms of what you're telling a story about. The donut is a great way of just kind of showing all the information in one place. And you can do some other things with the setup, which I'll go back to horizontal in a second. We'll talk through some of these other options. The metric is just a great way to show one number, and you can color code that number with ranges. And so if you just got a number that you guys say you need to maintain 100 million in your pipeline, and this number would be green if it was 101, it would be yellow if it was 99, and it might be red if it was 75 or something. So again, just a nice easy way, and you'll see when we get into the layout of the dashboard in a second. You can put that as a quick glance to kind of show some information about some various thing. So the gauge is next, and gauge is just really good at showing an actual number compared to a range of numbers that you want people to target. So in this case, the needle is showing me my actual number. In this example, this isn't pulling real data at the moment, and then it's compared to some kind of range of what we're doing. So again. Let me just do this real quick. So the point here is that so a gauge is a great way of just showing an actual number compared to a range, and then to color code that range based on whatever story you want to tell. So if you want to create different thresholds that you want people to perform to, the gauge is a great way to display that. The pipeline report is similar to what you've been seeing in some of the examples. It's just a great way to show the linear relationship between a stage field, like a pick list field, and the ability to see, what are the elements within each one of those stages. And so it shows the stages in order. And it did that the same on the bar chart, but most people, when we're thinking about pipeline and other opportunities, we think in terms of funnel. And so funnel's a great way to see all of that. The scatter plot is just a way where you can set the X and Y axis and display different relationships through these different dots. So for example, if I want to do record count for Y axis, I can modify that. And again, the goal here is to tell a story that provides a level of interpretation about the data that you're telling the story about. So scatterplot is just another tool to do that. And the final one is a table. Now, I said earlier that you can drill down into a dashboard and see the underlying report. The table is just a way of displaying a limited amount of information, and you can control how many records you see. But the whole purpose of a dashboard is to summarize and tell a story. So you want to be careful with the table. In some cases, you want to show a limited number of records or things that are some kind of exception, maybe deals that have been lost or deals that are at risk or something like that. And so a table is a good way to do that, that allows you to see the name of, let's say, the deal without necessarily having to drill down into it. Okay, so I'll go back to horizontal just to kind of finish this review. So we've talked about the different components. Now, as I scroll down on the left, I have different ways to set those components. So we already talked a little bit about the different setting of the different y-axis and the different x-axis. In this particular example, I have my y-axis, because it's a horizontal report, the y would be the category, in this case the grouping. And then I can do the dollar amount if I have dollar fields, or I could do record count. Now, you'll notice I just have one potential field and one record count. If I had multiple summary fields in my report, then I would have different options to choose from. So This is a direct example of whatever's in the report gets shown up in your chart settings or in your component settings. So in this case, I'll change it to record count just to kind of get a feel for it, so you can see the different elements I'm seeing in terms of total number of deals. Okay, and as I scroll down, I have different options. So display units allows me to show larger numbers in smaller numbers. And so you can do shortened number or you can do full. I don't really recommend full number because the minute you get into deal sizes of a couple thousand or even 100,000, it's just going to make your dashboard really, really messy, which is why they gave you this option. So I'll leave it at shortened number just for the sake of keeping it simple. Then you can do show values. If you're showing pictures of people and performance, you can show their chatter photos, and you can remove those if you don't want to show that. So again, showing values just allows you to see the actual number. You can see the bar just goes over 20, but in 22 million, it's right here. So in this example, because this is a pick list, and this pick list is not set alphabetically, Salesforce knows that that's a process field, which means the stages as they're listed in the pick list are in some kind of process order. So in this example, it's going to put them by default in order of the process. Conceptual comes before pre-design, design comes before bidding, etc. Now, if I want to sort this list differently, I can do that. And so if I come down here to sort, let's say I sort by potential, then I can say I don't really care about the process order. I want to see it in order of the deal size. So what's nice about this, and this isn't a great example in this chart settings, but if you look over here at this vertical bar chart, this is a list of neglected accounts by type. So I've got customers that are construction and general, and then architect, etc. So these are different customer types or different account types, and we have a value that tracks whether it's neglected or not. So it's a custom field on this account. And so I wanted to show by account type the largest number of neglected accounts. So this particular chart was sorted so that the largest number was at the left-hand side and it goes down to the lowest number. So that's a mechanism for sorting this. So in this particular case, this one over here is not sorted by record count. It's using the pick list, the order of the process itself to drive it. So again, depends on the story you're telling. For example, on this pipeline report, I'm not changing the order because this order is based on a pick list and I want it to show in the order of the process. So again, just different fields give you different things and they give you different capabilities. Okay, as I keep going down, I've got some other options. This is great, max groups displayed if you only want to show, in this case, we're limiting the report based on these pick lists. But let's say in this example, I have neglected accounts by type. I chose to limit this to 10 records. I think that's 10. I'm not counting right now, but I didn't want this, this thing to be massive. So I limited the number of records that would be displayed on the chart. So this is the field that you use to do that. Then you can give it a different title if you want to. You can also give it a subtitle and a footer. These are really nice ways to kind of tighten up the report and just make it look better. So for example, this would be the report type. This would be the subtype, etc. So those are just some different things. I didn't put any report footers in these examples, so you don't necessarily see any footers, but you could say different things like, the date, if you wanted to say something about the date or use this report when. So it's just some other ways to kind of make the report, make the dashboard a little bit tighter. Okay, then you can set the theme. Now, each one of those component types has different settings. I won't go through all of these in this video, but I will go through each component. We do have a video for each component that goes into all those settings and how it works and what drives it. So definitely go to the Reports and Dashboards playlist and spend some time there to really get some deeper design of that. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to go back and change my my sorting because I want to do it back by stage. And now I'm going to go ahead and select Add. So then this adds this widget to the dashboard layout. Now, at this particular place, I can move this around. I don't have any other ones, so let me just add one other quick component just to give you a feel for this. So I'll do owner by stage, I'll do funnel. I want this to be by stage, so I don't want it to be by owners. This would show me my entire funnel, and that's a good place to start. So I'll just go ahead and add that. All right, so now I can add these different elements, and I can change their size. If, for example, I want to add some other elements, let's say I wanted to add, so that's not a great example. I don't really like, I wouldn't actually do this in real life, but you can just see that you can kind of combine different things and you can size them differently based on different things that you're doing. Okay, so the layout is dynamic and responsive. A couple other quick things here before I leave. If you want to add filters, you can select different values to filter the report down. And so this is a great way for you to set filters that are controllable within the dashboard screen. So in this particular example, there weren't necessarily any filters that were added to this report or this dashboard. This dashboard shows what it shows. Filtering would allow you to then add other options, maybe filter by region or filter by user or whatever. So it's just another way to add some additional fields and other ways to limit the report. Now, why is that useful? Because you may want to use one dashboard but allow multiple audiences to use it. And so filters are a way for them to modify what they're seeing in the dashboard in real time without necessarily having to create a second dashboard. So for example, you might have a Western region or an Eastern region. You could just add region here. See if I have that field in that object. And if you have that, then you can then, I could sort by that or filter by that, and it would allow the Western region to set it to West and the Eastern region to set it to East. So filtering is a great way to do that. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and save this. And then I'll go ahead and select done. And you can see I named this example project. So I'll hit done here. And now this is my dashboard in its entirety. If I wanted to edit it, I could do that, etc. So that's a quick overview of how to create a dashboard. I want to just add a few other kind of pro comments and a couple other quick things that I recommend to people just so they're thinking of these things as they do it. The first thing is whenever you build a dashboard and you want to use it, you always need to refresh it. Because the dashboard is built on a collection of reports, Salesforce doesn't know that you necessarily want it to be up to date unless you tell it. And because a dashboard may be a collection of different reports, you need to actually go get the data at that moment. And to do that, you use the refresh option. The second thing to mention is the subscribe button. You can subscribe to a dashboard. And when you select subscribe, it allows you to define a frequency and a schedule of when you'd want to receive that dashboard via email. And so there's a lot of different things you can do here, but the basic idea is if you wanted to get, let's say, this dashboard Sunday night or Monday morning, you can schedule that and it will email it to you, and the dashboard will be in the body of the email. It's a really great feature. Okay, let me mention just a couple of other quick little tips about dashboards that I just generally recommend every customer. The first one is, we were talking about this dashboard being really responsive and really dynamic, and you can kind of build this the way you want it. And one of the downsides of this is that people end up over dashboarding. So what I recommend is that you try to keep your dashboard to 6 charts or less. So in this case, you'll see that I have 6 charts. I sort of try to keep a relationship between the horizontal and the vertical. And so in this example, you can see I see my projects by stage and spec type, and then I have project relationship and attitude, etc. The idea here is that I'm telling a story, and I want this chart to tell me more about this chart and vice versa. But I don't want to have too many charts. So that's the first thing. Second thing is you want to design the chart almost like it's an agenda for a meeting. And I have another video in the reports and dashboards playlist that talks a lot about how to use dashboards to drive sales behavior and how do you create that relationship between your salespeople and what they see on the dashboard. Like, how do you teach somebody to be responsive to a particular number? The funny little story I tell is, why do we all pay so much attention to the gas light on our car dashboard? Because when it hits empty and the gas tank runs out of gas, the engine stops. And we've all been conditioned, some of us actually by running out of gas, that hey, when that thing says quarter tank, I need to start paying attention. And so you want to develop that same awareness or that same sensitivity in your dashboards with your reps. So there's ways to build that. So if you think of this as this is the chart I'm going to use for my Monday sales meeting, or this is the chart I'm going to use for the customer service meeting every Tuesday. And if you think of it like the thing that you're going to have a discussion about, then it starts to provide more meaning. So for example, we're going to start by looking at projects by stage and spec type. And so we're going to look at this report, and I'm going to teach my team what numbers should look like and what's good and what's bad. For example, this says I've got 8 million in my conceptual design stage. If I were, I might tell my team that that's bad. We don't want things, stuck in conceptual design. We want to move things to pre-design, for example. That would be an example of where we're really emphasizing not only the design of a dashboard, but the way we interpret it. The other thing I would recommend is if you're currently running your meetings using, like, let's say an Excel sheet, then use that to build your dashboard. So if you've got a meeting report that you use today, build a dashboard that's based on that particular report. So build a report based on that spreadsheet, sort by owner, sort by stage, etc., and then do the same thing with that. But eventually, over time, replace that spreadsheet with that particular dashboard. The other final thing I'll mention is when we were building this, you can use the same report over and over again. Like you notice here, I use this report. I used the same report 3 times, and I just told a different story with the same report. So for example, let me just clean this up a little bit. I wanted to show the individual stages of the pipeline in this horizontal chart, and then I wanted to show the total pipeline. So if I were doing this in real life, I'd actually do something like this, where I would switch this over to a stacked chart, and I would change it from, I would go x-axis on the owner, so I'd want to show something like this, and then I want to show the stages in this. And so in this example, I just have 1 rep in this example, but if I had multiple reps, then in this chart, I would see my total funnel, 20 million, and then I would see how much of that was in Steve's chart and how much of Steve's chart is in conceptual design, let's say. So now within one screen, let me just save that so you kind of get a sense of what it would look like. Now in one screen, I can tell a story. Here's our total pipeline, and then here's the same structure, but now I see Steve's, Steve's portion of that pipeline and Dave's portion of that pipeline, etc. So using the same report with the same grouping, but telling different stories with it is a really useful technique. And so you can see some of that in this example where you're seeing, 1 or 2 different reports and then a different way of displaying it. So that is just a quick overview of how dashboards work in Salesforce.
Thank you for watching this video. On the screen and in the description, I've included links to our reports and dashboards playlist. And I've also included a 5-minute video that will share 3 strategies that we use to increase results and reduce Salesforce license costs through a Salesforce program called OSP. Please spend a few more moments of your precious time with us, and we will help you take Salesforce to a whole new level in your company. Finally, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.